The mess hall at Fort Davidson was alive with its usual morning chaos. Trays clattered, soldiers laughed and complained about the powdered eggs, and the industrial coffee maker hissed like an angry serpent in the corner. Elena Martinez moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her hairnet slightly askew, her apron stained with the evidence of breakfast service. She had been working in the kitchen for 3 months now, ever since her discharge from active duty. The bullet that had shattered her knee in Kandahar had ended her career as a combat medic, but not her need to serve. If she couldn't save lives on the battlefield anymore, she could at least feed the soldiers who still could. She kept her head down as she worked, refilling juice dispensers and wiping down tables. The limp was still pronounced, especially in the mornings when her knee was stiff. Some of the younger recruits would stare, and she knew what they were thinking. Another casualty of war, relegated to serving food instead of serving her country in the way that mattered. She tried not to let it bother her. She tried not to remember the weight of the medical kit on her back, the urgency in a wounded soldier's eyes, the satisfaction of knowing her hands had pulled someone back from the edge. General Robert Hastings entered the mess hall at exactly 0700, as he did every morning. He was a towering figure even at 62, with silver hair cropped military short and a chest full of ribbons that told stories of 3 decades of service. Elena had seen him before, always surrounded by his staff officers, always moving with purpose. She had never served him directly. The general had his own designated area, and the senior staff handled his needs. But this morning was different. Corporal Jenkins, who usually managed the general section, had called in sick. Elena found herself reassigned, her heart hammering as she approached the officers' area with a fresh pot of coffee. She told herself it was ridiculous to be nervous. She had performed battlefield surgery under mortar fire. She could pour coffee for a general. She moved along the table, refilling cups with steady hands, murmuring the appropriate responses to thank yous and nods. When she reached General Hastings, she kept her eyes respectfully downcast, tilting the pot with the same careful precision she had once used to administer morphine. The general looked up at her, and for a moment, their eyes met. She expected him to look away, to dismiss her as part of the invisible workforce that kept the base running. Instead, his gaze sharpened with sudden intensity. His eyes traveled from her face to her arm, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly, exposing a corner of the tattoo that covered her inner forearm. His hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not roughly, but with sudden urgency that made her gasp. The coffee pot tilted dangerously, and before she could recover, it slipped from her grip. The tray crashed to the floor with a sound like thunder, coffee spreading in a dark pool across the linoleum. The entire mess hall fell silent. Elena felt her face burn with humiliation. She tried to pull away, to kneel and clean up the mess, but the general's grip on her wrist remained firm. He was staring at her tattoo with an expression she couldn't read, something between shock and grief and desperate hope. The tattoo was a simple design, really. A medical caduceus intertwined with dog tags, and beneath it, a date. August 15th, 2011. The day that had changed everything. "Where did you get this?" The general's voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but in the silent mess hall it carried like a shout. Elena's mind raced. Was this against regulations? She had gotten approval for the tattoo, had made sure it could be covered by her uniform. "Sir, I can explain. It's Memorial Inc. for a mission I was part of. I have the proper authorization." The date. He cut her off, his eyes still fixed on her arm. August 15th, 2011. Kandahar Province. Operation Redemption. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. How did he know? The general released her wrist and stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He was a tall man, and standing, he seemed to fill the entire space. "Colonel Reynolds!" he barked at one of his officers. "Clear the mess hall, now!" Within minutes, the room had emptied, leaving only Elena, the general, and 2 of his senior staff members. Elena stood frozen by the spreading pool of coffee, her bad knee beginning to throb from standing too long in one position. General Hastings gestured to a chair. "Sit, please." It was a request, not an order, which somehow made it more unsettling. Elena sat, confusion and fear warring in her chest. The general took the chair across from her, and she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "Tell me about that day," he said quietly. "Tell me about Operation Redemption." Elena swallowed hard. She didn't talk about that day. Not to the therapists at the VA, not to her family, not even to herself when she could help it. But there was something in the general's eyes that told her this wasn't optional. "I was with the 52nd Medical Battalion," she began, her voice unsteady. "We were attached to a convoy doing a supply run to a forward operating base. Intelligence said the route was clear." She laughed bitterly. "It wasn't. We hit an IED about 20 clicks out. The lead vehicle took the worst of it. I was in the second truck." The general nodded, his jaw tight. "Go on." "The explosion flipped their Humvee. By the time we got to them, there were 4 casualties. 3 of them were already gone." Her voice cracked. But the 4th was still alive, barely. He was trapped under the vehicle, multiple compound fractures, internal bleeding. The fuel tank was leaking and we could smell smoke. Everyone was screaming at me to leave him, to fall back before the whole thing went up. She looked down at her hands, seeing phantom blood on them. But I couldn't. He looked at me and he was just a kid, maybe 19, and he was so scared. He kept asking me not to let him die alone. So I crawled under there with him. I gave him morphine, tried to stabilize him, talked to him, told him about my family, about my hometown. Anything to keep him conscious. It took them 45 minutes to get the equipment to lift the vehicle. 45 minutes lying in spilled fuel, waiting for a spark. They got him out, the general said. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded. "They got us both out." I rode with him in the medevac. "He survived 3 more days." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper, long enough to say goodbye to his family over a video call. Long enough for his mother to tell him she loved him. Then his organs failed and he was gone. The general sat back in his chair and Elena saw tears streaming down his weathered face. "His name was David. David Michael Hastings. He was my son." The world seemed to tilt beneath Elena's feet. She stared at the general, at this powerful man who commanded thousands, and saw him stripped bare by grief. "I never knew who you were," General Hastings said, his voice thick. "The reports said a medic stayed with him, risked her life to keep him from dying alone. They gave me your name, but by the time I tried to find you to thank you, you'd been deployed elsewhere. Then I heard you'd been wounded, discharged. I hired investigators, but you'd moved, and you didn't want to be found." He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Why didn't you want to be found?" Elena felt her own tears start to fall. "Because I failed him, sir. I couldn't save him. I was supposed to save people, and I couldn't save your son." "Failed him?" The general's voice rose, not in anger, but in anguish. "You gave him the most precious gift anyone could give. You made sure he didn't die alone and afraid in a foreign desert. You held his hand. You spoke to him with kindness. You risked your life so that a dying boy wouldn't have to face the dark by himself." He reached across the table and took her hand. "My son's last words to his mother were that he wasn't scared because an angel was taking care of him. You were that angel." Elena couldn't speak. The guilt she had carried for 4 years, the weight that had pressed down on her every day since she left the service, suddenly felt like it might crack and fall away. "I got the tattoo on the anniversary of his death," she finally managed. "I needed to remember. To carry him with me since I couldn't save him." General Hastings squeezed her hand gently. "You did save him. Not his life, perhaps, but his soul. You gave him peace in his final hours. You gave his mother and me the gift of saying goodbye. Do you have any idea how rare that is in war? How many families never get that closure?" They sat in silence for a long moment, 2 soldiers bound by a day that had broken them both in different ways. Finally, the general spoke again. "I also want to tell you that your service didn't end when you took that bullet. The way you've carried on, the way you kept serving even when your body wouldn't let you do it the way you wanted to. That's courage, too. That's honor." Elena shook her head. "I'm just serving food. You're feeding soldiers who protect our country. You're still part of something bigger than yourself. And more than that, you're surviving. You're living with purpose despite your pain. That's not nothing." The general stood and walked to the window, looking out at the base, he commanded. "I've been so angry for so long. Angry at the war, at fate, at God if there is one. But seeing you today, knowing that David had someone like you with him at the end, it's the first peace I've felt in 4 years." He turned back to her. I can't give you back your career as a medic. I can't heal your knee or erase what happened. But I can make sure you know that what you did mattered, that you mattered to my son, and you matter to me." Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, not caring that she was crying in front of a general. "He mattered to me too, sir. I think about him every day." "Then we'll remember him together," General Hastings said. "And maybe that's how we both finally find a way to heal." In the days that followed, Elena learned that General Hastings had arranged for her to receive a commendation she'd never known she'd been nominated for. He attended the ceremony himself, and when he pinned the medal to her chest, he whispered, "Thank you for being there when I couldn't be." Elena continued working in the mess hall, but something fundamental had shifted. She no longer felt like she was hiding or settling for less. She was still serving, still making a difference, even if it was one meal at a time. And once a week, she and the general would have coffee together in his office, and they would talk about David, about his laugh, his dreams. His life cut short but not wasted. The tattoo on her arm became something different. Not a mark of guilt or failure, but a reminder that even in the darkest moments, kindness matters. That being present for someone in their pain is a form of courage all its own. That sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't saving someone from death, but ensuring they don't face it alone. And on quiet mornings, when her knee ached and the memories pressed close, Elena would trace the lines of the tattoo and remember not just the young man who died, but the general who taught her that some wounds heal not through forgetting, but through finding meaning in the scars we carry.